Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Procrastinator's Pitstop. I am sitting with another amazing guest for you today. I am sitting here with David Cohen, and David is a globally recognized thought leader and contrarian consultant in organizational behavior who has spent decades helping companies across 5 continents transform their people practices to boost engagement, retention, and performance. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for being here. Certainly a lot of ground that we can cover. I'm definitely interested in hearing your point of view on some of these things. But before we dive into it, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show. And the question for you today is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most and why?
Interesting question. I would say sometimes it'd be Rocky and the other times it'd be Bullwinkle.
Interesting. Okay, so the pair of them.
Yeah, because sometimes it's taking action and other times it's being surprised by the action you've taken.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, well, it's definitely a first. I think that you're the first person to say Rocky, and Bullwinkle. Yeah, I like that. I like it.
Yeah.
So before we dive into the deeper matters here, we'll slide into one that's a little bit easygoing. How would you define procrastination, and what does it mean to you personally?
Well, procrastination is something my wife has accused me of all the time. It's knowing that something needs to be done and not getting it done when it should be done or in the way it should be done in a timely way. It's something that with my ADHD, I find I'm always thinking about something new that comes to mind, which distracts me from what I should be focused on, which then all of a sudden I realize what I committed to is not going to happen unless I get back to it and clear the air of what I'm thinking about. So to me, it's sometimes allowing your mind to just think of too many things at the same time and getting taken away from what you should be focused on and then winding up not getting it done and people not being too happy with you as a result, because sometimes you don't keep your promises that way. So procrastination is a difficult thing. And even though I help people with their procrastination, like write it down, make a list, do this, do that. It's like the cobbler's son. I don't always practice what I preach.
Well, thank you for that, and I like to pick up on some of that language there because I think you hit a pretty big point that we don't naturally discuss on the show very often, and that is when you say being accused of procrastination, right? When somebody else says we're procrastinating, it often confuses things a little bit, right? Because it's their task that they want to get that it's their priorities versus your own sort of priorities, right? And you're right, it's not necessarily that we mean to do it sometimes. Sometimes we get distracted, or we don't understand those priorities. Actually, I have this with my own wife, right? So she'll tell me to take out the garbage or something, right? Something easy, which I don't mind doing, and I say, yeah, I'll do it. But in my mind, when she says take out the garbage, she means now. And in my mind, when I hear take out the garbage, I hear get it out to the curb before the guy shows up to pick it up.
Tomorrow morning.
Yeah, exactly. Tomorrow morning, right? So I guess we all have that. We know that there's no sort of one surefire 100% fix all, right? But what's been your sort of go-to to help yourself get back on track?
Well, it's repeating. Excuse me. It's repeating the sort of a mantra that says it's not about when you want to get it done, it's about when they want to get it done. And so, is it really important to get it done? And what I've learned is if you want to show that you care or show that you're paying attention, it's trying to get it done in their time frame, not your time frame, because your time frame, while it might be convenient for you, it doesn't show that you've listened or care for their time frame. So if you want them to reciprocate the favor of doing something on your behalf, do it on their behalf when they ask it to be done. Often that might require writing it down. My biggest procrastination is in business. People will tell me, write this person, call this person, do this, do that. I'll nod my head, I'll say yes. And then I won't get it done. They ask me the second time. Well, if I write it down, the list of names, and it's sitting next to my computer screen, I know I got to get it done. I'll get it done. So I tell people to help me. And that's another thing. Sometimes we just need people, give people clues on how they can help us. So I tell people I work with, if you want me to do it in a timely manner, make sure it's done. Put it in an email, which I'll read, or send me a text message, which will be in front of me. So I know I got to get it done. And even then, I have to transfer it to that note that's sitting next to me because the very act of writing it down forces me to think about it. So it's not just receiving it, it's actually doing something about it. That helps me.
I like that. I'm a big proponent of lists and reminders, and that's sort of the double-edged technology right there, right? Because we have so many tools that we can use, but at the same time, those tools are attached to other applications or other things sometimes that keep us distracted. So I love that you have like a written out list. It's definitely about that. David, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and sort of how you came to be where you are today?
Well, I started out many, many years ago in New Jersey, where I was born, and lived there for 17 years. I lived down what's called the beaches, or what's commonly referred to as the Jersey Shore, the area of Asbury Park. And yes, I have the dubious distinction of knowing Bruce Springsteen when he was with the Castiles, because he used to play at our high school dances. So that goes back a long way. So after that, I actually uh, initially went into, after graduated university, I went into rabbinical school and started my theological studies, then got into use that to work in education for many years. I did a doctorate in education at Boston University and Harvard, a joint degree in ethical education, moral education. At some point after being invited here to Toronto by one of the schools, realized very quickly that it's parents I couldn't stand, not schools. Parents drove me nuts. So probably still be at it if parents weren't involved. But had to make a choice. My kids loved Toronto. They were really young. And I had to make a choice and decided to look into consulting, found the job, started working with a major consulting firm for a couple of years, worked for a few boutique shops, and then 91 started my own business and been going on since then. I've worked on every continent except for Australia and Antarctica. Hope to get to Australia someday. Done speaking conferences all over the world. Enjoy the travel. I know I'm crazy, but I enjoyed the travel. And I written 3 books and did things that I never thought I would do when I was growing up. Gone to places when I was growing up. I never the only 2 places, 3 states I'd ever been in is New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And it was New York was New York City, and Pennsylvania was Philadelphia. We're getting to Philadelphia, so I never really left the New York, New Jersey area. And now I've been all over the world. But when I was even in high school, never thought I'd really go much beyond where I was. So, because I grew up wanting to be a journalist and wanting to get into sports writing. So that's what I spent a lot of focus on. But it didn't work out that way. So that's where I'm at.
Uh, mhm. Oh, thank you for sharing that. It brings to mind the question. You said that we all procrastinate and things time to time, right? But you seem to have made quite a success, of yourself. So you've obviously, done that pretty well. What do you think was your biggest challenge in, you know, building that successful business that you had?
My biggest challenge was confidence, self confidence in doing it. Um, I always took on things that I'd never done before, I guess. Having grown up with a severe learning disability back then in the dark ages when I was growing up. It was just called being a troublemaker. I was, he couldn't sit still. He couldn't pay attention. I had eye problems, which are quite severe, also coupled with what now is called dyslexia. So all of that made for, when people tell you you're not going to be successful very well, you kind of believe it after a while. So in grade 8 or 8th grade, depending if you're US or Canada, in grade 8, my teacher told my parents that I should go to vocational school because I'd never get into university. But I didn't listen to her. It wasn't easy. I struggled in high school, but I worked really hard. struggled in undergraduate school until my third year when I finally realized I got my act together. And that's when I finally realized I could probably do whatever I wanted to do. I was the editor of the university newspaper. I had accomplished a lot of different things and started to grow the confidence that I could do things that I hadn't done before. But I also was always challenged when people told me I couldn't do it. I had to prove to them I could. So just tell me I can't do something. And then all of a sudden procrastination ends and determination kicks in. So I think it's a matter of over time realizing certain things just have to be done. You don't have a choice, and you have to get it done, and you have to go forward. And one door closes, another one opens, so to speak. So you just got to keep knocking till you find one that's open.
I love that. Always, always forward. Thank you for sharing. Can you give an example or explain to our listeners? Why is it that they call you the contrarian consultant?
Oh, that's a fun story. Yeah, I picked up that moniker at a conference once when the organizer of the conference introduced me, called upon me unexpectedly, and goaded me into asking a question of somebody that I didn't want to ask a question of because I knew what she had been saying was counter to everything I had heard about the company. So he introduced me as a contrarian consultant, I think to set it up that I was going to ask her a difficult question. But people that knew me that were at the conference really liked it, kept calling me that. And I find that people like the fact that, you know, the other moniker that a lot of people use is the non-consultant or the unconsultant. I don't like that one. Contrarian consultant to me simply means I will tell the emperor they have no clothes. And sometimes because of my ADHD, which is coupled with outburst disorder, I will tell them quite bluntly until their point when nobody else has told them. Or a lot of things which are popular in consulting necessarily don't work except in theory. And so I will say, for instance, a lot of people use psychometric testing for selection. Psychometric testing deals with people's traits. All it says that under certain conditions, they might do this, but people believe it's the gospel. And I say, use psychometric testing carefully and take it as a data point. But the answer to a well worded question is more important than the psychometric results. Because if it's a well worded question, it's going to talk about what they've done recently. And what they've done recently is an indication what they'll do now. So, and the other thing, let's say, is contrarian. Everybody talks about in performance. Past performance is the best predictor of future performance. And I say it's not true. We're different than we were in high school or university. Probably different than we were 10 years ago. Partially true. It's past performance, which is recent and repetitive. Recent and frequent is the best predictor of how they're going to act on the job. So don't take just past performance. They give you a great story that fits everything you're looking for that happened 10 years ago. My question is, why in the last 9 years and 11 months haven't they done it? So if they haven't done it in 9 years, 11 months, don't expect them to do it for you. So I guess that's why I'm a contrarian consultant. I'll look at things that are practical and real and not necessarily too far up in the air. Though I can get real theoretical if you want.
I like that. It does beg the question, and I love that you brought up, past results are not necessarily indicative of future results, right? Past performance is not indicative, right? They love saying that on Wall Street. Past performance is not indicative. I like what you say there. Recent behavior and repetitive behavior makes more sense. Now, let me ask you, when you're building these teams, is it more important to have team cohesion, as in, their personality is more important at the end of the day than, say, I'm not going to say that their level of skill is not important at all, but is it more important to have that sort of click in terms of personality, that cohesion, and then maybe train the person, or is it better to have them have the skill?
Good question. It's an interesting question because it's an internal question. And right now, my concern with this new focus on skills, we're going to go back to what happened in the 1950s. As long as you can talk about doing the job, they'll hire you even if you can't do the job. And then you learn it. If you're smart, you learn the job real quickly on the job. But you don't get along with anybody and they fire you. So this is in my early days in doing consulting, I was doing work on leadership and on organizational behavior and came up with this understanding that people are hired for their education and experience. They're promoted for their results and fired for their behavior. And if you understand behavior and get along, I can teach you anything. But if you don't, as long as you're in the ballpark, if you don't have the right behavior and you don't have an alignment to the value set, then no matter how much you know, you might get the job done, but nobody's going to want to work with you. And if nobody wants to work with you, then you're going to have all sorts of issues and people might even sabotage your work and other things. So I think it's more important that there's an alignment in values, the behaviors of the values. Now, don't get me wrong, just because some people say they have respect, respect can be many different things. And so you need to know as a person what your definition of those things are in order to work with an organization that has a matching definition. I would simple answer is the skills are important. That's your gateway to get the job. But to get the job and fit and be successful, you have to have the right behaviors. And that combination doesn't mean you're going to agree with everybody in the team. And it doesn't mean you're going to have the same perspective or background as anybody. You can have people from all over the world that have similar value sets and similar belief systems, but come at it with a richness of diversity, which will enhance the team anyhow. So it's having that common bond. Says after we have a good, honest disagreement, after we have a knockdown, drag out argument over what to do, we shut the door and go have a beer together because it's not personal. It's just about the idea. But if you have differences of value set, differences of behavior, you can shut the door and never talk to each other after that. That isn't going to work. That's not success.
No, and you brought up something interesting there when I guess when it comes to kind of boundaries in and out of the workplace, right? Some people, and there are some cultures that say that but to be more productive, you're stuck in a cubicle, you don't talk to your neighbor, you don't interact, you don't do anything, right? And therefore, like it doesn't really matter what interactions you have. Now, does it depend on the kind of work? And would that sort of separation be more productive than, say, having an open concept? Or
No, we are social human beings by nature. Like I tell people say, well, always somebody works in IT and they go around and think about the guy who's the plumber who comes to your house, fixes a drain. He might do a great job, but upset you by what they said. They might accuse you of causing the problem by doing this, or they might say to you, you should never do that. And you're thinking you're here to fix the damn drain. Or on the other hand, think of the repair person that comes and says to you, there's a problem here. I've got to go off and get another tool or another gadget in order to fix it right, explains how to prevent it from happening again, and has a different personality, a different relationship. And you write to say to them, listen, I want to take down your name and number because if I have a plumbing problem again, I want to have you back. Well, why do they want to have them back? Because they fixed the drain properly? Because they had an interaction with each other that created a connection. The way I look at it, another way I look at it is I always I do a workshop on understanding how important behaviors are. So I'll ask people to think about the fact they just won the lottery. They have millions of dollars they don't know what to do with. They've always wanted to go in the restaurant business and open this high-end restaurant. So they got this beautiful design, great chef, great menu, great wine selection. Now they have to hire these servers. And we talk about what is the things you're looking for. And then they kind of always focus on those technical skills. And I say, so if I come in, it's a recommended restaurant. I come in, have a really bad meal, but the server had a sense of humor. The server was somebody who helped recognize I was having a hard time before I even articulated it and smoothed it over and tried to correct it, et cetera, et cetera. And it wasn't such a great meal. And I leave. Well, I come back versus the guy who comes in who has a great meal. And the server, on the other hand, ignores them, is late, is not paying attention. They always have to call them and get their attention. And the meal was fantastic. But when they think about going back, they're not going back. Well, the reason to go to a restaurant is have a good meal. But the behavior of the server caused them not to come back. So if we don't get the behaviors right, we don't create the relationships. And, you think about different organizations you go to. And, well, you think about the Bay. And tomorrow's its last day of existence after 500 and some years. But how many times have you gone into the Bay and you could go bowling before you can find somebody to serve you? And you'd say, do I want to go back there and have to look for them to take my money? I'm not going to do that. But I'll go to Canadian Tire, where if I ask somebody for help, they'll walk me to the item and they'll help me. So I'll go to Canadian Tire, which is now buying the Bay's logo. So it's the best of both worlds.
It's
That's the difference to me.
funny how that works out, right? But it's interesting. I like your analogy with the restaurant, and really puts it into perspective. So where does that leave us when we're talking about AI and these automated bot? I mean, they're always going to be polite. They're always going to give you what you need. So is that detrimental to an organization, do you think, or is it
Uh,
an asset?
it depends on what you're using AI for. Like if you're in the medical field, AI has been able to help physicians diagnose things and solve problems they never thought they could do before. On the other hand, when it's being used for human resources, talent management issues, it's created more like Workday is now being sued because it overlooks, it doesn't recommend anybody over the age of 40. So it's got an age discrimination thing built in. Why does it have an age discrimination built in? Because whoever set the data up set it up to interpret that people over a certain age or with a certain amount of years experience equal being over 40. Therefore, we're not going to hire them. We're not even going to interview them, even though they might be the best candidate. Amazon had the same problem where their AI they taught their AI by reviewing historically the documents of the people who were hired. Then they wondered why they were getting all male applicants to interview. When the idea was to try to make it unbiased and get women applicants to come in. So they spent $1 million on that and they had to throw it out. So AI I think when it comes to the human side, it's kind of like a psychometric test. It's a tool to give you information, but you have to decipher if in fact that information is accurate and is it the information that you need, or do you have to ask it more questions? And the other thing with AI, which it's not just about asking its questions, it's about asking the right questions. It's how you word those questions to set it up to get the information. So there's a lot of learning yet to be done with it. I don't think that it'll ever replace people because every time there's been an industrial revolution, everybody's always said, oh my God, we're going to lose all these jobs. And then more jobs are created in fields we never even thought of. So I think that there's still hope. And, it'd be really nice if machines can produce all the income in the world and we can just sit back and take the money and do whatever we want. I mean, that'd be a different kind of world, but I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Yeah, they're sort of like Bicentennial Man, I think was the movie. Robin Williams was the
Yeah.
robot, and the guy owned the robot, but sold the clocks, and he got the place. Don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, though, right?
Nah, nah.
Um, but you hit something on the head there that, at least, and I want to get your take on this, is that I have come across quite a bit of procrastination when it comes to the corporate world and actually entering the corporate world because, people put out resumes, they don't get a result, they don't get a response even, you know, or people who are in journalism, like you said, you wanted to be a journalist yourself, people who are in creative writing and journalism classes, they're freaked out because now, DeepSeek and these other ones can, go out and they can put a camera on a robot dog and the AI can look at everything going around and make the article for them. It's insane. But, I like what you said. What you said that sure you're going to lose some of this, but you're always going to need some sort of human intervention at some point, right?
It's they had a professor from the university in Jersey City, New Jersey on CNN the other night, and he had failed his student because the entire paper she gave in, she never read it over. It was just an AI paper. And even though the quotes were accurate, the reference from who wrote it and the article who wrote it was all wrong. And he knew that. He also knew, because it was a creative writing class, the work she did in class was radically different from what she wrote in the paper. The sort of the irony of the whole thing is she writes him a letter saying, what can I do to make it up and have a better grade, et cetera, et cetera. And he said it was obvious that AI wrote the letter of apology. And so he told her no. But here's a trick on how to find out if it's written by AI. AI uses something instead of commas, it uses dashes. So when you see there's a lot of dashes in there, it was probably written by AI. And there's tools now that you can use. You just put it in there and it'll say, is probably written 85% chance is written by AI. So I think that the human element, that sense of feeling emotion, at least for now, AI will not capture. It does really well in the medical field when it deals with facts. But when it starts to deal with emotion and information that's coming at it, it's not going to replace people. I don't think it is. I could be really wrong. And it's also not accurate. It's, like I did a search for something the other day and it said, yeah, it said something to the effect, well, you have to realize I don't have any information that's more than 18 months old. I only have information that's over 18 months old. So it might be a new book you're looking for. So it's also dated information because a lot changes in 18 months. So you have to be careful. If you use it as a tool, read it, throw away the garbage from it, take the ideas from it, make it your own, great. If you use it as a crutch, it's going to be detrimental in the long run. That's my opinion. I think there's a
Well,
real,
I mean,
I think there's an ethical issue with it when it comes to using it for human evaluation.
yes, that is one part, yeah, the whole screeners and the filters and things. Yeah, I heard about those and how nobody gets in. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a balance though, right? Because people are using the AI tools because, especially recruiters, because you have so many applicants now, right? So they want to sift through the best applicants and, they can't sift through 1,000 resumes. So they hit keywords or they hit key factors or experiences, like you said. Then maybe somebody gets in and they learn what keywords they're looking for or what attributes they're looking for, and then they just get into an interview and they're not qualified. So there
Well,
has to be some sort of
I was talking with a person who was a former client who was part of a group of 1,200 people let go from our organization a couple of months ago. And they gave them outplacement. And the outplacement counselor actually teaches them how to look for key words to put in the resume for the application so that AI screening mechanism shortlists it. It doesn't mean she has those things. Well, in her case, she does. But the fact is, many people can just put in those key words. The AI will read it and say there's a match when in fact that person doesn't. That's why, my new book on selecting the best says you still got to do an interview. You're not going to hire the person without meeting them and interviewing them. So you can get past that if you ask the right question. But you're right. I think that people have learned how to they always learn how to game the system and make it work for them. And putting in keywords into your application or when you're filling out those forms on LinkedIn for the company, you just make sure you get the keywords in there so you get shortlisted. That's all. So it's not perfect. Recruiters still have a job. They're not going to be replaced.
I wanted to swing back actually on your new book and the fact that you've written 3 books too, and I always ask this question of authors, and my audience is already rolling their eyes. They know it's coming. So they say that writing a book is 98% procrastination, 2% actually doing it. How true has this been for you in your various books?
Oh, it's procrastination. You can call it writer's block. You can call it, I have other things to do. There's a deadline if you working with a legitimate publisher and not self-publishing. You have certain commitments you got to keep. And, they always on TV shows, you always hear about the author who's going to miss the deadline. My publisher's on my case. I haven't produced the book in 2 years, whatever it might be. Yeah, there's things that's why a person who's a real writer, people that write for a living, which I don't do, I write for because I enjoy it and I think I have something to say. They sit down and they spend their time just like a job, 9 to 5 in front of I had a cousin who was an author. He had a cottage in Connecticut. When he wrote, he was there and he was up at 6 in the morning. He'd do his swimming exercises, get out of the pool, and for 10 hours, he'd be in front of that damn computer. Well, he wrote on a typewriter, but he'd be there and he'd get it done because that was his job. And he literally, when he finished writing, one day announced he retired from writing because that was his job. If you're a real writer, yeah, you might have writer's block, but it's got to get done. When you're writing books like I write them, and like most people write them, there's a lot of reasons why you put off writing until something strikes you. And so, yeah, there's procrastination. I don't know if it's that percentage, but there's there's procrastination, which is disguised in writer's block. But here's where AI comes in handy because you can put in all the ideas you have and tell AI to produce something or think of something or organize it for you. You read it, you have an outline, you go right. No more excuses on writer's blocks. It's AI.
The downside to that one too is that there are those people like in that example you gave with that individual who used AI to write an entire paper. There are people that there's an actual business model around this. I had some Instagram ads forwarded to me because I'm not on Instagram, but they tout it as the way to make money in the new era. And that you go to ChatGPT, you slap a book on it, you create a book cover, you slap it up on Amazon, and you slap up like 1,000 of them. So now, thanks to this nice little endeavor, somebody told I haven't fact checked this, so don't shoot the messenger, but said that there's an upwards of 10,000 books put out every single day.
Well, I haven't fact
And
checked that either, but I do know when I talked to my publisher, my first publisher, Wiley, they said of all the books that they get proposals on, they actually publish less than 1% of them. So if you think that Wiley's published thousands and thousands of books, think of how many books they turned down. Now here's the problem. They turned them down because they didn't think they were structured enough or well written, or they didn't say something new, or because whatever reason, they didn't turn it down. Now that person turns around and self-publishes. And you read some of these self-published books, and they got spelling mistakes, they got grammar mistakes, they're not really well written. So you're right. There's a lot of garbage out there now. That's why I always look to see who published the book. And if it's a friend, I'll buy it, even if it's self-published. But if it's something that is not, the greatest story of all on self-published books is Who Moved My Cheese. And that was long before the internet. And the author just put him in his car and went from mom and pop bookstore to mom and pop bookstore and said, give me a book signing. I'll talk about it. People came in and by word of mouth, it became popular to this point where it's still in the top 10 in many lists. Self-publishing can work and self-publishing can reveal a really solid book. I think you're right. I know a guy who will go nameless. who talked about he published a book because he felt it gave him credibility to be published, but he admits that it was done 90% by AI. Not my cup of tea.
Well, that flows into a whole other kettle of fish that we could probably take in a whole other podcast on. Well, I guess Robert Cialdini said it best when in his book Persuasion. We have all these certificates, we've got all these books, we've got all these titles, we've got all these accolades, and they really don't mean anything. You know, they're ghostwriters too, right? I talked to a few coaches. I actually read their books. I go to talk to the coach and I say, "Hey, in your book you said this. You know, what do you think about it?" And he's like, "Oh, I didn't write the book." Then they had a ghost.
I'm not going to say who those people are. I know them also, but I also know the ghostwriter. And if anybody's looking for a phenomenal ghostwriter, please get in touch with me because I can put you in touch with probably one of the best ghostwriters out there for business books. He's phenomenal. And, but you're right. A lot of people spend a lot of money on a good ghostwriter to get that book out there. And, it's no different. I mean, my book, when Wiley first read it, they had an editor go over it and she rearranged the whole damn book. She said this chapter's too large. This one goes before this one. Now it's not a ghostwriter. The content stayed the same, but you need a second person to read it. You can't just think you've done it yourself. You need an editor. And there's a thin line sometimes between a ghostwriter and an editor if the editor rewrites everything.
That's certainly fair. That actually brings me to the last sort of item that I had for you is why don't you tell us about your new book? Yeah, what
Funny you should
yeah, tell
ask.
us about it. Yeah, there you go.
There you go. It's selecting the best, fostering a workplace driven by diversity for lasting success. And it really focuses on what we were talking about before. How do you build a team where people are aligned with the values of the organization based on what the authentic values are, not the ones written on the wall, but what really differentiates success? And then how do you turn that into an interview process that's based on true behavioral questions? So I try to push. The first chapter of the book is about busting myths. One of the myths is hiring for culture fit. People misunderstand that by saying that we're going to have people that look the same, dress the same, walk the same, went to the same school. No, culture fit is about fit to values. And as I said before, that can come from any place in the world. And there's great diversity in that. So what are the behaviors of our values that make this place unique? And then asking the right questions. So people, the two favorite questions you always hear is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Well, you go to ChatGPT, they give you a great answer to that. You memorize it, you go in and give it, and the person thinks it's a great answer, but it doesn't tell you anything about them. Zero information about them. But if I let's say I'm hiring for a retail position, and one of the biggest issues in retail, especially with young people, is shrinkage or theft. And you ask the person, tell me about a recent time where you were under pressure from your friends to do something. Well, they come up with, well, I didn't want to do this, but I did it anyhow. They're probably going to be an issue with that person finding ways to get their friends' stuff out of the store without paying for it. Right. Tell me about a time when you realized that you had a significant disagreement with your boss. Now, I didn't say what you do, what was the disagreement. I didn't say anything. Period. Full stop. Because as soon as you say, what was it? What did you do? The person now knows you expect to hear a story of what they did. Well, maybe they just swallowed it and kept it to themselves, thinking it's the better way of behaving, knowing their boss. Well, that could be a good answer because the person was emotionally intelligent and realized that their boss would not respond very well. But if you give them those questions at the end, what you do, how was it resolved? The person's going to try to think, well, you want to know, they want to know it was resolved because they're always decoding in their mind, what's the right answer? And the clues you give are based on the words you use and the tone of voice. So in the book, I teach people how to write a good behavioral question, which is not a question, it's an interrogative statement, period. know what you do, who was involved, when did it happen. None of those. You ask those later to sort of peel away the onion. But ask good behavioral questions. You'll find out if people really fit your organization. And then the big problem is scoring it and getting back to the idea of past performance and future performance. I use a scoring mechanism. I teach people about identifying recent repetitive stories to give them higher scores than others. So there's a whole mechanism in there for scoring as well as at the end of the book, I have an appendix which gives away quite a few behavioral interview questions. And I say the book is equally as good for people who are looking for a job, not just those hiring, because you'll be able to understand the mentality of the hiring manager better if you read the book. You know, people, one time I was doing a workshop with a bunch of nursing students for a nursing college where we're teaching the staff on how to hire better. So they use the students who are graduating to give them interview experiences, sort of like to put them through this for the education of the teacher, of the managers, not themselves, just give them that experience. So one group was walking out and the other group walking in. And one of the students asked the students, well, how do you prepare for the interview? And the student smiled and says, you don't have to prepare for it. You just have to tell them stories of what happened. And to me, if you tell them the truth about who you are and how you behave and you don't get the job, you should say, thank God, because I could have been in a mess if I got the job, because I got it under false pretenses. But if I get the job, that's great because they know exactly who I am. No surprises either way. It could be very beneficial for those who are looking for a job as well. That's a little bit about the book.
Well, it definitely sounds like a good read. Where can we find?
Best place to find it is where all books are found, on Amazon or on Barnes and Noble or Indigo, any of those places. It should be available online and buy it that way. A new way of getting books.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It definitely sounds like a good read. I might go out and pick up a copy myself, actually,
I'd appreciate
because
that.
I'm always interested in. Go ahead.
It'll help you have better questions for future podcasts.
Sure. Find the right people. Right. Definitely a good one.
Yeah.
David, it's been a really great conversation. I could probably go on for another couple hours because I had a bunch of questions open up actually, but we are coming up pretty close to the time. Is there anything that you wish I would have asked but didn't ask, or anything that you feel we should have covered?
Why the Toronto Raptors have a lousy team? Oh, no, that's a different subject.
Well, you could say why have the Maple Leafs never won why have they never gotten a Stanley Cup since
Yeah, that's
what
the
is it
other
like
question I have. Why is, you know, because they're trying, because Maple Leaf fans have to suffer the way Chicago Cub fans suffered for 100 years before they get another victory. So they can say they're the long suffering fans.
seems to be the way.
Yeah.
Anyway, David, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a real
Thank
pleasure,
you. It's been a pleasure. I'm glad you have been a nice conversation.
and it certainly was. And to all our listeners, thank you once again for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that inspiration or motivation for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that motivation or inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.